You're listening to a presentation of the Father Colby Missionaries of the Immaculata. Find out more at colbymission.org.
Everyone in this room who's a professed Christian, professed Catholic, and in the state of grace, the Beatitude is already existent inside of us. It's already there. So what he's saying is to be Christian is to be blessed and happy. Okay? So we can see that the Beatitudes aren't a command to do something, right? But they're a description of what a human being is like who is being transformed by Christ, right? So it sounds like a future promise, but it's not. It's Jesus saying, this is where you are right now. This is what it is to be Christian, right? He's not saying you'll be happy later. He's saying you are happy now, okay? Or you should be happy now, and this is why, okay? St. Paul's theology focuses a lot on participation in Jesus, right? Participation in the body of Christ, in the death of Christ, in the suffering of Christ, right? Everyone here has heard the expression the body of Christ before, right? So if I ask you, what is the body of Christ? What is the body of Christ? The church and us, correct? The mystical body of Christ is the church, right? And us, as members of the church, are members of the mystical body. It's something that we are participating in right now. And we are, as long as we're in a state of grace, we're participating in every moment, right? So the Beatitudes then are an explanation, basically, by Jesus of what it's like inside the body. So he establishes the church and the order of grace. And then as far as we participate in the church and partake in the order of grace, we're going to, one, go through the trials and whatnot that consists of, right? So being meek and poor of spirit, right? And hungering and thirsting for justice and all the things that are difficult but are intricate and integral to being members of the body and can't be escaped because the crucifix can't be escaped, because to escape the cross is to escape Jesus, but we don't want that, right? But it's a paradox because in the cross is where we find salvation, right? So in the same way, in the Beatitudes, where you find these things that sound difficult, it is, but it's beautiful because he's not saying, oh, hold on a little bit longer, be meek a little bit longer, you're going to get this, you'll be rewarded later. Be, hunger and thirst for justice now and later. He's not saying that. He's saying that in those things, we find our completion in the body of Christ, right? That's where we find our beatitude. Sounds crazy, right? Not crazy. I overuse the word crazy. I apologize. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe, right? And why is it hard to believe? Because it's a paradox. It's a paradox. Well, how is that supposed to, how is being meek going to make me happy? How is suffering going to make me happy, right? But that's what he's saying the Beatitudes are about. Now, how does this work? How does it work? Again, real quick, it's glorious because St. Paul says what? That eye has not seen, ear has not heard what? Right, well, God has, and what's that talking about? That's talking about heaven, right? That's talking about the afterlife. Okay? So, we're not going to see the full reality of eternity until what? Until we die and we go to heaven, right? But in the Beatitudes, again, not a future promise, it's what's going on right now. So he's saying in the Beatitudes, even though we can't know what's going to go on when we die, we can't know what heaven will be like, but the Beatitudes give us a glimpse of what? The participation that we're already experiencing right now with Jesus. So the Beatitudes are, we are blessed and we can be happy and we can be full of joy because of the things that we're already experiencing right now in our relationship as Christians, right? And as members of the body of Christ. So to a large degree, we have a stable, deep, and serene beatitude that we find as members of the body of Christ, right? That's not affected by the world around us, right? That's what he's talking about. When he's saying, blessed are thee, and then fill in the blank with whatever difficult situation or trial that we're going through, that matches up with whichever of the Beatitudes, they're blessed despite all that because the world can't touch it. Okay? There's an old saying that happiness is an inside job. Okay? Meaning that it's interior to us and that real happiness can't be seen by the world, right? So it's kind of like a spy mission almost, right? It's almost like a spy mission, because the world will look at you and be like, why is that guy so happy? You know what I mean? They'll look at Father Paul, and he doesn't own anything. He owns very, very little. You know, he'll like the clothes on his back and a couple pair of shoes, and it's pretty much it, you know. So how could he be happy? It's almost like this great secret, right? But it's found in the Beatitudes. Okay, so in the Beatitudes, Jesus wants to instill us with something that's completely unshakable, that can't be taken away by anybody, upset by anyone, or soiled by anyone. And why can it not be taken away by anyone? Because it's not given to us by any one person. It's only given to us by God. It's only found in God, right? And God didn't call us to Himself in order for us to grasp and then all of a sudden, through no fault of our own, have it taken away. Because He wants to give it to us. He's promising us. He's not only promising us what's going to happen, He's promising us what's reality right now, okay? Okay, so one is blessed even when poor, even when mourning, even when persecuted, okay? They are confirmed in their blessedness by such realities, since these things are reminders that we are not at home in this world, and that God and His kingdom are our preoccupation and the source of our true beatitude. So right now we're just going to go over the first one. Blessed are the poor in spirit, right? Which is like it's like the second part of the theme, right? So courage to be happy, and happiness is only found in the Beatitudes, because Jesus is promising us that this is the happiness that's going on in our hearts and our souls right now just by partaking in Him. So, and blessed are the poor in spirit. What are the poor in spirit? What does poor in spirit mean? The poor in spirit are those who know that they are completely dependent on God and rejoice in it. Okay, the poor in spirit are those who know they are completely dependent on God and rejoice in it. So, to be poor in spirit doesn't mean that you are in poverty, although it's easier to be poor in spirit if you are in poverty. You can own possessions. A very wealthy person, who can be a very virtuous person and be poor in spirit. It's not that he has control of possessions that make him unable to be poor in spirit, right? But the difference is that despite having all those things, a person with possessions can still see that they're completely dependent on God and not dependent on those things, okay? So they can possess things, but what they don't allow things to what? Possess them. You see the difference? They know that God is in control of their lives, and this makes them happy and at peace. Why? Because the more we strive to get control, the less happy we become. Right? And that's seen all the time. Okay? All the time. The more you try to control, the less happy you become. Okay? Some people want money and power and manipulate people because possessions give them a feeling of power. But all that is a false assurance, right? That can be taken away and disappear, and then they have nothing, just like that. Okay? And power, okay, virtue and vice work. The only thing virtue and vice have in common, that good habits and bad habits have in common, is that they get easier as time go on. Okay? So the more you commit a vice or a particular sin, the easier it becomes as your spiritual senses are dulled, so to speak, right? But it goes the other way too, that the more virtuous you are, the easier it is to be virtuous, right? So good habits build up good habits, bad habits build up bad habits. Okay? Now, when we're talking about power, and by power I just mean lacking poverty of spirit, right? It really is like an addictive drug. Because the more you get, the more that you need. Right? Because if you want to feel secure, and you grab something that you think is going to make you secure, what do? You panic more, right? You panic more when it doesn't work out. Imagine if you're like on a ladder and you're like, okay, yeah, this ladder could support me, and you're up against this building, and then the ladder starts to go, and you're like, oh, okay, what is your initial reaction? Like, oh, okay, this isn't working. What's my next plan? I'm going to grab this rain gutter, and then you grab the rain gutter, and say you weigh like 200 pounds, right? that's probably not going to make you feel real secure either. But what are you doing? At that point, you're like, oh, the ladder backfired. What's the next thing? Oh, I'm going to go here. And then your situation just compounds itself and gets worse and worse and worse and worse, right? One really good example of power being like an addictive drug that doesn't really help anything is if when you look at what's one area that the modern world is without, modern meaning the last 100 years, say 50 years, is without a doubt advanced or has benefits of past generations, over past generations. What is it? Yeah, technology, right? And then what's another form of technology basically for the development of what medicines say? Okay. So 2 examples I thought of is one, a friend of ours used to run a company that makes cochlear implants. You guys know what a cochlear implant is? But point being that someone who's almost completely deaf, that a hearing aid wouldn't even help, can hear almost perfectly. Right? So we're talking about technologies that can make deaf people hear. So you'd think, what would you think? Oh wow, if we have developments of stuff like that, we must feel really secure about what? Our health and our well-being, right? Another one was at the World Cup. Who saw the first kick of the World Cup? You know how they do like a ceremonial first pitch in baseball? Did you guys see the ceremonial first kick? Yeah, and what was it? No, it was a kid, right? The paralyzed kid, or was it an old guy? Oh, okay, I didn't see it. I just read about it. Okay, so it was an old guy. But it was a paralyzed person, okay, paralyzed from the waist down, can't move his legs, but he walked out and kicked the opening kick of the World Cup with a robotic, like electronic exoskeleton that they built for him, right? So we've been blessed. That should be a huge blessing, right? Where we've been blessed with technologies that let almost deaf people hear and people that are paralyzed walk. And it's in an artificial way, but it's still a huge blessing, right? And it's, you have to work out this much. You got to do CrossFit. You got to do P90X. You got to do, what are the other ones? Insanity. You got to get the Bowflex. You got to, all that stuff. And I love working out. I love going to the gym. Okay? You're supposed to eat healthy and, stop. You're supposed to eat healthy, you're supposed to eat healthy and exercise. But when we live somewhere when we live in an age in which all that we've been blessed to know and discover, you would think that that's going to make our lives easier. It's going to make our lives, we're going to have more peace. I could have more peace. But instead of those things leading to us being more peaceful, we're less peaceful. And we're less secure in ourselves. And we're less secure in our eternity, right? Because the more at home we make ourselves on earth, which is essentially what those things do, right? If we feel like we can manipulate time and space and plants and minerals, if we can use our knowledge that we've developed and we can take the earth and manipulate it to our greatest good, what are we doing the more that we do that? If we're not poor in spirit, where are we making our home? We're making our home here on earth, right? And we become more and more comfortable. And we think, if we develop this, we're gonna become so comfortable here. Because I can manipulate this mineral and that, and, all the different sciences come together, and voila. And yet here we are in 2014, and people are less at peace. People are less at peace. Right? So it really is, it's addicting because we keep thinking, well, if only we have this, if I couldn't just make this, if only, and it just doesn't work that way. Okay? So those who are poor in spirit, they're blessed because they're free of the countless fears that flow from control. That flow from control. And a lot of times people look at someone who would take a vow of obedience or someone who's truly poor in spirit, and they'll say, well, how can they relinquish control like that? Like, that's like giving up your free will. Is it? And I say, Lord, take control of my life. That's my free will right there. It's my free will, right? That's speaking those words. That's saying, Jesus, I want to give you everything. I'm giving you my free will. Which is what we do in the consecration, right? When we're consecrated to Our Lady, we're not saying like, oh, I don't want any responsibility. So, it's the opposite, right? You're taking on more responsibility. The only difference is that you're entrusting it to Our Lady, who knows how to do it better than we do, right? Because she was ultimately poor in spirit. She was, to be 13 or 14 and to have no husband and then